April has not been a good month for Russia. The country has suffered some serious defeats, including the costly loss of a valuable and rare weapon, as well as multiple failed assaults along a new front line in the area of Pokrovsk. Added up, the many defeats that Russia has suffered in recent weeks have led to hundreds of casualties, dozens of destroyed vehicles, and likely some serious blows to the already low levels of morale among the Russian troops. One of the most devastating blows came on April 9, when Russia lost one of its few remaining tactical assets with outsized strategic value, the KRVD. The KRVD, otherwise known as the Temporary Road Deployment System, is not an offensive vehicle. It doesn't boast any mounted chain guns, anti-air launchers, or anything of that kind. Yet, it is arguably even more important than those kinds of vehicles. Why? Because it's capable of essentially creating safe, strong, temporary roads for other vehicles to travel along. Here's how it works. The KRVD is made up of two separate modules, each mounted on the back of a CAM AZ 63501 trucks. Each module is capable of deploying more than 160 feet of road, for a grand total in excess of 320 feet, around 15 feet wide. The modules are fast too. They can roll out their sections of road in around 5 minutes. To do this, the vehicles drive in reverse, rolling the flexible road material into place. Once rolled out, the road can support the movement of wheeled vehicles up to 12 tons, as well as tracked vehicles weighing up to 60 tons. For reference, Russia's main tank, the T-90, weighs in at around 46 tons, so would have no trouble rolling along this temporary road. Many of Russia's armoured vehicles too can rely on the KRVD to help them get around. Once the road has served its purpose, the KRVD modules can retrieve and roll it back up, then use it again for future deployments. As a result, units travelling with the KRVD effectively have an almost magical ace up their sleeve, the ability to make a relatively long section of road as and when they need it. And in certain areas of Ukraine, like swampy, marshy or muddy terrain near rivers and other bodies of water, a tool like the KRVD can prove invaluable. It helps to construct temporary routes across difficult terrain, or even support temporary or permanent river crossing points. Without the KRVD, tanks and other vehicles could easily get stuck in the mud, requiring hours or days of effort to extract or forcing the Russians to leave expensive military hardware behind. In short, it's a very valuable tool in the Russian arsenal, and this particular KRVD unit was being used to support a river crossing across the Chornyi Zherebets river in the Donbass region. If successful, this could have allowed Russia to funnel a lot of firepower over the region and onward, in the hope of taking more territory in the area. Unfortunately for them, the Ukrainian defenders had other ideas in mind. Ukraine's 66th Separate Mechanized Brigade spotted the KRVD and made use of FPV drone strikes to target it. Their attack was successful, with the KRVD being completely destroyed. Photos of the vehicle's remains were shared on social media, and adding insult to injury, the destroyed KRVD ended up blocking the crossing point, so Russian armoured vehicles in the area were unable to advance. The Russians later took advantage of the Easter truce period to clear out the remains, according to the 66th Separate Mechanized Brigade. And on April 20, they claim Russia sent in more than 10 men and an additional specialized vehicle to drag the wreckage away, clearing the crossing. However, this was still a notable victory for the Ukrainian side, as it delayed the enemy's progress and forced the Russians to use up more manpower and vehicles to deal with the destruction. It also represented the very first confirmed loss of a KRVD since the invasion began, a big achievement for the Ukrainians. And that's not only the big first Ukraine has accomplished in recent times. On April 19, a report from the 152nd Separate Rifle Brigade confirmed Ukraine's first successful destruction of a Russian locomotive. According to the Ukrainian military, the locomotive was an important cog in Russia's logistical machine, helping to transport weapons, ammo, and other supplies across different occupied areas of Ukraine. It was targeted and taken out by drones, with a video shared by the 152nd Brigade showing a drone flying under the train and exploding in a burst of flames and smoke. The Russian war machine took yet another hit earlier in the month, when Ukrainian aerial forces took out some of Russia's most valuable electronic warfare systems, dealing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of losses to the enemy. This incident was reported in a video shared by Ukraine's Operational Command South on April 15. The video revealed that Ukrainian bomber drones had been used to target the Russian Boris-Oglebsk 2 electronic warfare complex systems. The system is made up of a mobile control post, manned by a 4-person crew, as well as multiple EW stations, situated on armoured MT-LB vehicles. In total, 9 specialized vehicles, equipped with an array of jamming and signal intelligence tools, made up the Boris-Oglebsk 2. It can be deployed in just 15 minutes to carry out widespread signal disruption, not just locally, but across vast areas of land. Each one of those systems is said to be worth around $200 million, and they're used for jamming satellite and radio communications, making them vital tools for the Russian invasion. But Ukraine had no trouble at all blowing up a pair of them. It used reconnaissance drones to first discover the systems before launching precision bomber drone strikes to take them out. The Operational Command South account summed up the incident. In both cases, our aerial reconnaissance teams detected the enemy EW complexes and dispatched our bombers. Our pilots struck the Boris-Oglebsk 2 with the first drop and finished them off with a second controlled drop. The result? Around $400 million in losses for Russia, plus a big hit to their electronic warfare capabilities. But the losses don't end there. Far from it. As well as taking out some key hardware of late, Ukrainian forces have also managed to repel an array of Russian assaults along an important new front line in the Pokrovsk region. Pokrovsk is a city of around 60,000 people, located in the western Donetsk Oblast of Ukraine. At first glance, it may not seem all that special, but it holds a massive strategic advantage for whichever side has control of it. For now, that's Ukraine. The Ukrainian defenders have dug in deep in Pokrovsk and surrounding towns and settlements, doing all they can to fend off one Russian attack wave after another. It's important that they continue to do that, because Pokrovsk has an array of strong transportation links, including both roads and railway lines, which make it a vital logistical location. The Ukrainians have used that in their favor so far, relying on the city's strong connections to provide supplies for the troops. If Russia were to take Pokrovsk, however, it could turn the tables. The Russians could move a large number of men and hardware into the city and then push onward, using the Pokrovsk-Kostentenivka highway to perhaps enter the Dnipropetrovsk region and take more and more territory. It would be a crippling blow for Ukraine. But luckily for Ukraine, it hasn't happened yet, despite Russia's best efforts. In fact, Russia has instead experienced one failure after another in the area. Even when it has tried to overwhelm the Ukrainian opposition through sheer numbers, its forces have either been destroyed or forced to flee. That's exactly what happened to the 90 motorcycle assault unit that Russia deployed along the Pokrovsk front, hoping to gain some ground and edge closer to capturing the city. But Ukraine was ready and waiting. Viktor Trehubov, spokesperson for the Hortetsia Operational Strategic Troop Grouping, reported on the event. He explained that a large assault was launched by Russia, but every single vehicle of its 90-strong motorcycle unit was destroyed, along with their drivers and riders. According to Trehubov, Pokrovsk is the most intense sector of combat at the moment, but Ukraine is standing firm. An interesting element of the Pokrovsk front is that despite the fact that the Russians are making more efforts, they have the least success there. There's plenty of evidence to back up Trehubov's claims. Just a few days before the motorcycle assault on April 17, Russia launched one of its biggest assaults yet. It sent a massive amount of men and vehicles towards Pokrovsk. Alexander Pivnenko, commander of the National Guard of Ukraine, detailed the attack on Telegram. There he wrote, "Today, the guardsmen of the 14th Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine, Chervona Kalina, powerfully repelled a large-scale mechanized assault by the Russian occupiers in the Pokrovsk direction. The enemy threw a large amount of equipment into the battle. This time, most of it was armored combat vehicles and motorcycles, as well as about 2 companies of manpower. Hundreds of men, dozens of vehicles. A fierce move, in the words of Junior Sergeant Stanislav Bunyatov of the 24th Aidar Assault Battalion, and one of the largest offensives seen in the region so far, according to the 14th Brigade's head of communications, Mykola Koval. The plan on the Russian side seemed to be one of brute force. By sending in such a large assault unit, Russian commanders clearly hoped to pile pressure on the Ukrainian defenses, forcing their way through to victory. Countless times throughout history, we've seen larger forces simply overwhelm their opposition on the field of combat. But not this time. The Russian invaders were not ready for the might and resilience of Ukraine's 14th Brigade. In a battle that was said to last about 7 hours total, the Ukrainian side came out on top. Commander Pivnenko shared his pride in the Telegram post, writing, "Our defenders showed true professionalism and resilience. The results of the battle are impressive." Pivnenko then went on to list the estimated Russian losses. According to him, more than 200 Russian soldiers were killed, with at least 30 others injured. Close to 100 motorcycles were also destroyed, along with dozens of other armoured vehicles and some artillery systems too. A convincing victory for Ukraine without any shadow of doubt. As Pivnenko summarised, "This battle is another proof of the coordinated and professional actions of our defenders who hold the front. The fighters of Chervona Kalina act clearly and ruthlessly towards the enemy, defending every piece of their native land. Thank you to our heroes for their steadfastness and courage." The commander also shared a couple of videos of the battle, mostly made up of drone footage. The clips show various Russian vehicles being targeted, bombed and destroyed. They also show Russian soldiers fleeing from the battle, with one even shown waving a white flag of surrender at one stage. Captioning the clips, Pivnenko wrote, "A few more shots of the repelling of the enemy's biker assault in the Pokrovsk direction. It's obvious that after clarification, the number of enemy losses will be greater. Thank you for the courageous and decisive actions of the fighters of the NGU Chervona Kalina Brigade, as well as the 1st Kodak and 4th Pavlograd Regiment of the National Guard. Glory to Ukraine." This was a huge victory for Ukraine and a serious defeat for Russia in more ways than one. For Ukraine, it was further proof that, despite having a small force, the defenders are more than capable of using their strategic advantage to outwit the enemy and fend off even large-scale assaults. For Russia, it was a sign that their brute force attempts to overwhelm the opposition may not be enough after all. And this was far from the only battle along the Pokrovsk front. In fact, according to Ukrainian military reports, there have been dozens of Russian attacks in this region on a daily basis for quite some time now. On April 21, for example, more than 60 enemy assaults and offensive actions were tallied, all successfully repelled by the Ukrainian side. We don't have details on all of the many Russian assaults, but information about some of the larger and more important ones is often shared on Ukrainian military social media accounts. On April 20, for instance, military unit 3017 of the National Guard of Ukraine shared a Facebook video showing its soldiers in action. The soldiers managed to not only fend off a Russian assault and maintain their hold over Pokrovsk territory, but also captured a Russian soldier. The story is but one of many. Each day, the Russians continued to bombard and assault the Pokrovsk area, probing and prodding at the Ukrainian defensive line, hoping to make gains wherever they can. But Ukraine isn't giving them an inch, and with each successive victory, no matter how small or large, the Ukrainian forces continue to gain morale and belief. Imagine the contrasting negative effects on the Russian side. They're losing men, their equipment is being destroyed, their vehicles blown up, and their multiple assault items intercepted and countered again and again. It has to have an effect on their morale. Soldiers throughout the Russian ranks can see that their fellow men are being sent to their deaths, and this is happening not just in Pokrovsk and the surrounding Donetsk region, but all along the front. In the Kursk region, for example, there was a recent incident in which the Ukrainian Air Force managed to carry out a precise and highly effective strike on an enemy pontoon crossing. Various vehicles were making their way across the pontoon at the time. 2 were damaged beyond repair, thanks to the explosive impact of 3 GBU-39 bombs, and a Russian soldier actually posted a video of the devastation afterwards, sharing his frustration and claiming that he'd warned his superiors not to bring any vehicles to the area. Again, it's one example of many, and clear proof of anger and discontent among the Russian ranks. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians have an increasingly long list of reasons to celebrate, and their efforts in and around Pokrovsk have not just been limited to defending their territory, they've also made strides in regaining lost ground. On April 17, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky, announced that his forces had liberated around 6 square miles of land near Pokrovsk. Syrsky also visited the area in person, meeting the various brigades, some of which are manned largely by volunteers from Kyiv and other parts of Ukraine, and learning about the ongoing offensive and defensive efforts in the area. Over the course of 3 days, I visited almost all brigades of this most powerful grouping of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, which bears the brunt of the enemy's spring offensive and destroys its best forces and means. Sersky added that dozens of Russian assaults are being successfully repelled on a daily basis by these brave brigades, and as long as that continues, it's good news for Ukraine and bad news for Russia. Additionally, recent reports have even suggested that Russian forces are slowly but surely retreating from the area. It could be that they've decided that enough is enough. They may have realized that their efforts in and around Pokrovsk are a waste of men and resources, and they could be adjusting their battle plans or moving troops around to target another area elsewhere along the front line. Again, that's a positive for Ukraine, as they need to keep hold of strategic locations like Pokrovsk for as long as they can, making the most of their logistical and transportation advantages. Of course, it's not all smooth sailing. Ukraine is rightfully concerned for the future of the conflict in this region. For now, it's managing to hold key ground, but there's no telling if and when the Russian forces might decide to adjust their tactics, or even ramp up their assaults, doubling or tripling the amount of men and firepower they deploy to try to take the city. Let's not forget, after all, that Russia still has a major manpower advantage over its opponent. There are believed to be more than 1.1 million active duty soldiers, plus 1.5 million reservists making up the massive Russian army, compared to just 800,000 active duty members and 400,000 reservists on Ukraine's side. Russia has greater numbers of tanks and armoured vehicles too, with around 5,750 tanks to Ukraine's 1,100 and 130,000 armoured vehicles, dwarfing Ukraine's estimated total of under 20,000. For now, Russia can continue to lean on its numerical advantages, carrying out more of these intense, high-pressure assaults to try to wear down the defenders. After the successful Pokrovsk defense of April 17, Stanislav Bunyatov of the 24th Aidar Assault Battalion shared a troubling message online, stating that these kinds of Russian attacks would become increasingly difficult to deal with. He wrote, "The focus of attention gets scattered, the risk of breakthrough rises, artillery becomes less effective, and FPV drones without optics face limitations." So, even though Ukraine has had a good month so far, many battles and challenges still lie ahead. Even if some of the Russians are retreating, Pokrovsk remains a hotbed of activity, with dozens of daily assaults and offensive maneuvers. Ukraine will need to continue showing that same fortitude and resilience that its people have become synonymous with over the last few years to keep on fending off these attacks, holding their ground, and perhaps even making gains of their own as the days, weeks, and months go by. But what do you think? Will Russia change tactics to target another strategic location? Or could it be preparing an even bigger assault on Pokrovsk in the days ahead? And how does all this play in the overall picture of the war and Ukraine's chances for victory? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe to the Military Show for up-to-date news and information about military conflicts around the globe.